Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese with the National Weather Service. Today's weather, we still have the remnants of Super Typhoon Nuri that's impacting some of our weather, but that's on the downward trend there as far as the impacts go with that. And let's get started by taking a look at our satellite imagery over the North Pacific and the Bering Sea to kind of see what's going on to start with. Currently, we do have, this is what's left of Nuri, is a complex set of low pressure systems in the Bering Sea that's continuing to advect moisture on up into the Alaska Peninsula. Then as we change our focus back to south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, we can see the next system that's going to play a role in the weather out into the western Aleutian Islands in the next few days. Basically by late Thursday, we'll start to see the impacts of that system, or not late Thursday, but by Friday, we'll start to see the impacts of that system in the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at the GO satellite over the state of Alaska, to start with, one thing you can notice is southeast Alaska is cloud-free. It was cloud-free today, but we'll put this loop in motion, and you can see this moisture that's been streaming on up into the Kodiak Island area, the Aleutian Mountains across southwestern Alaska. Kodiak Island, the city of Kodiak had record amount of rainfall yesterday with over 2.5 inches of rain in one day. I believe it was about 2.42 inches of rain there. That set a record, single-day record for yesterday for Kodiak. Still expecting more precipitation to move in there, as you can see with this satellite imagery and this moist flow coming up out of the Gulf of Alaska with warm, moist air right on up to the Arctic coastal areas, which will see reflected in the temperatures. Very warm conditions for this time of year, especially for mid-November, to have the temperatures that we're seeing around the state. Very warm conditions, but not too surprising when you're dealing with the remnants of a old super typhoon that brings a lot of warm air into the mix. Taking a look now at the surface map today, as I said earlier, southeast Alaska, sunny conditions. We have this trough of low pressure, but most importantly, this moisture that keeps streaming on up into the southwest portion of the state. Another trough extending on up into the interior, and yet another trough up along the Arctic coast. Some scattered showers along these trough lines, but nothing very intense. The strongest precipitation, heaviest precipitation, has been over that Kodiak Island area. Up into the Bering Strait, generally cloudy to partly cloudy conditions with the trough of low pressure to the west of that area and the west of St. Lawrence Island. So they're right on the fringe of any precipitation there. In the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, weak low pressure over the eastern Aleutians, some rain showers there, weak low pressure over the central Bering Sea with this trough down through the central Aleutian Islands, and there are also some weak rain showers, light rain showers there. By tonight, we'll see this low pressure system and southeasterly flow into the Kodiak Island area persisting. High pressure over the British Columbia Yukon Territory area, keeping the clouds at bay over southeast Alaska, so clear conditions over the Panhandle for tonight. In the Copper River Basin, generally clear conditions, except we are anticipating some fog as we will see a temperature inversion there. Kodiak Island should be seeing rain heavy at times tonight, rain across the Bristol Bay region, rain mixed with snow at times up into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and as well as up to the St. Lawrence Island area, you have a chance of some rain and snow mix there. Chance of rain and snow mix in the Norton Sound region as well. Cloudy conditions up to the Arctic coast, and then also rain over the Alaska Peninsula. Out to the west with our weak low pressure over the central Aleutian Islands and a trough extending west, some rain showers can be expected along that trough line. Taking a look now at the forecast for Thursday. High pressure is holding over the Yukon Territory, high pressure also in the British Columbia area, keeping the Panhandle for the most part sunny tomorrow. Sunny conditions over the eastern interior, portions of Prince William Sound, even northern Cook Inlet, the Susitna Valley, right on up to the eastern Brooks Range. Then along the north slopes of the Brooks Range, expect things to be clearing out. Along the Arctic coast, generally expect cloudy conditions to persist, except for the eastern Arctic coast. As we change our focus back to our main weather maker, this low pressure system, advecting moisture on up into the Kodiak Island area. The low pressure system is starting to re-intensify with another shot of energy that's coming in from what's left of the tropical storm or Typhoon Nori. Rainy conditions persisting across Kodiak Island as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Some rain right along the coast of the Bristol Bay area as well as the Yukon, the Kuskokwim Delta, the Yukon Delta, expect a mixture of rain and snow there, basically along the coast. Inland areas, there's a chance of rain in the Bristol Bay area, like over towards Iliamna, as well as a chance of rain towards the Aniak area. Chance of rain and snow around the Norton Sound region and the Seward Peninsula. Generally speaking, cloudy conditions in the Kotzebue Sound area. Taking a look back out to the western portion of the state, weak ridge of high pressure over the central to western Aleutian Islands. We'll see things settling down there, but you are starting to see the next system coming into the picture with some rain over the extreme western Aleutian Islands, and that will come into play Friday as the occluded front pushes on into the western Aleutian Islands. See the winds will shift around, and you'll also see rain moving into the area Friday. Our system south of the Alaska Peninsula will push its front into the eastern Bering Sea and then down across Kodiak Island. Rain's going to persist across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. Kind of sound like a broken record there, a continuation of rain in Kodiak Island. Rain in the eastern Bering Sea, possibly as far west as the Pribilof Islands. Rain also can be expected into the eastern and central Aleutian Islands. Some rain showers up into the northern Bering Sea in this trough extending towards the Chukotsk Peninsula. Over the mainland, generally speaking, expect sunny conditions throughout the majority of the mainland portion of the state. Cloudy conditions will persist along the Arctic coast, essentially from Barrow west. Southeast Alaska will get to enjoy yet another day of sunshine on Friday. Taking a look now at temperatures around the state today. In Southeast Alaska, temperatures generally in the mid-30s to low 40s are what were prevalent this afternoon there. As we move on over towards the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound, you can see the influence of all the warm air. These are temperatures that you would expect to see basically in late August, early September type temperatures, upper 40s to low 50s from Cordova over towards Homer, mid 40s to upper 40s across Kodiak Island. Moving on into the Copper River Basin, temperatures are actually at the freezing mark in the low 30s today. Crossing the Alaska Range, you can see the influence of the Chinook winds with a 48-degree reading there, looks like in that Delta Junction area. But then you can see the temperatures are a little bit cooler as you get over towards Fairbanks, right around the freezing mark. So move on up to the Arctic coast, temperatures very warm for this time of year. Low 30s to even low 40s over towards Cape Lisburne, 21 degrees over towards Barrow, and temperatures right around 30 degrees over the eastern Arctic coastal areas. Along the Brooks Range, temperatures in the mid to upper 20s to the east. And as we move on over towards the Kotzebue Sound area, yes, it is November 12th, and we're still seeing temperatures, or we are seeing temperatures near 40 degrees in Kotzebue Sound. Very warm conditions for this time of year. Norton Sound area temperatures in the mid-30s to mid-40s, and also down into the Yukon Delta, upper 30-degree readings there. Into the western interior and southwestern Alaska, nearly 50 degrees at McGrath, 49 degrees there. Temperatures in the mid to upper 40s across the Aleutian Mountains. And of course, this is because of the strong cross-barrier flow Chinook conditions that have developed in that area with that strong southeasterly flow. Across the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures in the low to mid 40s there as well. Upper 30s in the eastern Aleutian Islands at Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Upper 30s in the Pribilof Islands at both St. Paul and St. George. And then across the remainder of the Aleutian Islands, temperatures in the mid-30s over towards Atka and Adak, with mid-30s at Shemya. And of course, that's because the colder air is wrapping back around the backside of what's left of the low pressure system that was in the Bering Sea. Low temperatures for tonight. Expect southeast Alaska to be on the chilly side, and that's because it's clearing out. Temperatures in the northern panhandle in the teens to low 20s to the mid 30s as you move on to the southern panhandle. In the south central region, temperatures will be dropping into the upper 20s to mid 30s there. Copper River Basin with clearing conditions, particularly in the eastern portion of the basin, single-digit readings there. Same thing in the eastern interior. The clear skies are going to yield to much lower temperatures because of the radiational cooling expected across the eastern interior, 4 below up at Fort Yukon. Along the Arctic coast, however, somewhat cloudier conditions are going to hold the heat in. Temperatures in the teens over the eastern Arctic coast to the mid-30s as we move on over towards the Cape Lisburne area. Mid-30s to low 30s over the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound area. Mid-30s over the Kuskokwim Delta and the Yukon Delta to the low 40s in Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Mid-30s in the Pribilof Islands down to the eastern Aleutian Islands, as well as across much of the remainder of the Aleutian Islands. For your highs tomorrow, expect temperatures to be in the mid-40s throughout much of southeast Alaska until you get in the northern panhandle and some inland locations only making it into the mid-30s. 40-degree readings to upper 30s along the North Gulf Coast. Temperatures only getting into the low 20s in the Copper River Basin, although there may be a few places that will see temperatures near 30 as well. Temperatures in the low 30s in the eastern interior to the teens as you get on up into the upper Yukon Valley. And then up along the Arctic coast in the Brooks Range, 30-degree readings along the Brooks Range, as well as much of the Arctic coast with mid to upper 20s over the eastern Arctic coast. In your Seward Peninsula region, Kotzebue Sound area, mid-30s can be expected there, mid-30s in the Norton Sound area to the St. Lawrence Island region. Temperatures in the mid-30s over the Yukon Delta to the low 40s over the Kuskokwim Delta to mid-40s as you get on down towards Bristol Bay with the upper 40s across the Alaska Peninsula. The Pribilof Islands, low 40s for today, for tomorrow for St. Paul, mid-40s in the Unalaska Dutch Harbor area with temperatures in the mid-40s over the central Aleutian Islands and only making it to 40 out in the Shemya area. For our flying weather tomorrow, expect generally VFR conditions over southeast Alaska and much of the mainland in that strong, moist southerly flow, marginal to IFR conditions across Kodiak Island to the Alaska Peninsula, marginal conditions over the Aleutian Islands towards the Iliamna area and Lake Clark, marginal conditions along the Bering Sea coast right on up through the Bering Strait, as well as portions of the western Arctic coastal areas from Barrow west. Also expect some marginal conditions in the Pribilof Islands and the eastern Aleutian Islands over towards Dutch Harbor. For our passes tomorrow, expect VFR conditions for both Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass in the Brooks Range. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, some marginal conditions at times, but predominantly VFR conditions, but it's going to be going up and down with that southeasterly flow bringing clouds in and out there. Rainy Pass, expect VFR conditions for tomorrow as well as VFR conditions for Windy Pass. Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass are both expected to be VFR for tomorrow as well. Down towards the Chugach Mountains and Tahneta Pass, expect VFR conditions, and also for Portage Pass, VFR conditions as well tomorrow. In southeast Alaska, both Chilkoot and White Pass also expect VFR conditions. Taking a look at our freezing levels for tomorrow, pretty high freezing levels, but you're going to have a surface freezing level across the Copper River Basin as well as the northern Susitna Valley on into the western interior. Warm air aloft is going to ride up over all of that low-level cold air. And of course, with the radiational cooling, you're going to have some cold air trapped in near the surface. 10,000-foot freezing levels over the northern panhandle to 8,000 feet over the southern panhandle. 8,000 feet sloping down to about 6,000 feet along the Bering Sea coast to 2,000 feet as we get on out towards the eastern Aleutian Islands. Also expect freezing levels above the surface freezing temperatures to 2,000 feet over the western Brooks Range and western Arctic coast, and temperature freezing levels out across much of the Aleutian Islands right around that 1,000 to 2,000 foot level. And that brings us to our icing for tomorrow. Expect some occasional moderate mixed icing basically over the Kodiak Island area and the Aleutian Mountains on the basically north side of Shelikof Strait down to the eastern Alaska Peninsula. Occasional or isolated moderate rime icing can be expected over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast as well as portions of the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands. Taking a look now at our jet stream for tomorrow, it starts off at about 160 knots south of the Kamchatka Peninsula to 125 knots crossing the Aleutian Islands, 95 knots well south of the Gulf, coming up across Kodiak Island at 75 knots makes a going over the top of the ridge at about 100 to 115 knots, and then tapers off to about 50 knots just inland of southeast Alaska. Taking a look down at the 9,000 foot level, generally light winds over the eastern interior, 20 to 25 knot winds across southeast Alaska to the Prince William Sound area, 35 knot winds across the Gulf, accelerating to 50 knots across the Barren Islands to Kodiak Island region, 30 knots as you get on up towards the Kotzebue Sound area, and about 50 knot winds coming across the Alaska Peninsula, tapering off to 15 knots up through the central part of the Bering Sea. And then on the west side of this system, you have about 20 knot winds coming down across the central Bering Sea to 35 knots over the central Aleutian Islands. And then the next system is going to be coming into the picture, and you start to see winds at about 30 knots in advance of that. Taking a look down at the 3,000 foot level, light winds over the mainland, about 20 knot winds, 15 to 20 knot winds across southeast Alaska. Much stronger winds as we get across Kodiak Island, about 30 to then 55 knots over the eastern Alaska Peninsula to 40 knots as we get on over towards the western Alaska Peninsula. 20 to 25 knots in the eastern Bering Sea as well as the central Bering Sea, and then 50 knot winds in advance of our next system coming into the extreme western Aleutian Islands. For our turbulence tomorrow, expect some widespread moderate, occasional severe turbulence across Kodiak Island below 2,000 feet and the Aleutian Mountains, as well as some moderate turbulence over southwestern Alaska and a moderate to severe turbulence across portions of the eastern Aleutian Islands. That wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment. Come back for the marine forecast.
There are some important things we can all do to avoid runway incursions. Things we probably all know, or have known but forgotten, or that we sometimes overlook because of distractions. Some of these things are simply plain old common sense. Always look, listen, and expect the unexpected. Minimize distractions by keeping a sterile cockpit while taxiing. Know where you are and where you're going. Never guess. Always know. And if you don't know or are uncertain, always ask. And that brings me to a word or two about the best ally we pilots have at Howard Airport, the air traffic controller.
Runway 25 left at Delta position and hold traffic on the downwind.
These are the professionals dedicated to leading us safely through the often complex and confusing runways and taxiways and traffic of a Howard Airport.
Cessna 60 Papa, turning base at the 605 freeway, report turning final.
The pace of air traffic communications can be confusing, even overwhelming. We should not feel hesitant to ask controllers to repeat an instruction, to ask for progressive taxi instructions if we need them.
Narrow ground, Cherokee 32123, request progressive taxi instructions, please. November, Charlie, Bravo.
If you don't know, ask. If you aren't sure, verify.
When communicating with air traffic control, always listen before you transmit.
Cessna 3284 Delta, holding position, runway 19 right.
Also, listen to what the controller is saying to other aircraft. It can have a critical bearing on your safety. Again, maintaining situational awareness at all times is key. Be sure you understand all air traffic control instructions. If you receive a clearance you don't understand or is contrary to your position on the airport, you should verify the clearance.
Cessna 453 Sierra Papa. Runway 19 full length, cleared for takeoff.
Tower Tower, Cessna 453 Sierra Papa. Is at Bravo 3. Verify we're still cleared for takeoff.
Cessna 3 Sierra Papa. Negative, hold your position.
453 Sierra Papa. Holding short, runway 19 at Bravo 3.
Runway incursions occur most frequently when pilots enter or cross a runway without authorization. Typically, communication between the pilot and air traffic control is good. Pilots hear and read back hold short instructions and know what they're supposed to do.
Cessna 93018, hold short, runway 26 right.
But they cross hold short lines or taxi on the runway without authorization anyway. Always read back all hold short instructions.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
A simple Roger won't do. This applies to position and hold and clearances to enter a runway as well.
Cessna 80138,
position and hold, runway 25 left.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
We can avoid most runway incursions by reducing distraction in the cockpit while taxiing, familiarizing ourselves with our departure and our destination airports, and staying alert at all times.
Be sure to write down taxi instructions, but never do it on the move. It can be a distraction. The same is true with checklists. Conduct them while stopped, never on the move. Pilots, controllers, and drivers all rely on their eyes as their primary sensors. And the simple fact is, our eyes don't work as well at night as they do during the day. The visual acuity we lose at night, combined with inconsistent cockpit lighting, canopy reflections, and possible rain, snow, or fog, make taxi, takeoff, and landing operations that seem easy during the day a real challenge at night. Pilots should observe a few simple lighting standards that will help those around them maintain their situational awareness. When taxiing into position and hold, turn on all exterior lights except landing lights. This will make your aircraft more conspicuous to other aircraft on final. Don't turn on your landing lights until you have been given clearance to take off. If you see an aircraft with its landing lights turned on, it's a clear signal that that aircraft is moving or is about to move down the runway for takeoff. When instructed to cross a runway, turn on all lights, including landing lights. The exception would be if your lights would interfere with someone holding or approaching from the other side of the runway. Also, when you line up for departure at night, consider lining up about 3 feet to the left or right of center line, so another pilot on final can more easily distinguish your aircraft from the runway lights.
Welcome back, and now let's take a look at our marine forecast for Southeast Alaska on Thursday. Expect in the southern outside waters, right along the outer coastal areas, southern outside waters, east winds 20 knots, tapering off to 15 knots as we move on up to the east Gulf Coast. North winds 25 knots down through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. Northeast winds 20 knots out of the across the central inside waters, with east to southeast winds 15 knots in the southern inside waters. On Friday, the directions don't change at all. Winds are going to drop off to about 15 knots in the central inside waters, increase to 30 knots as we move on up towards the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, and east winds 15 knots all along the southern outside waters right on up to the east Gulf Coast, all out of the east. Taking a look at the south central region on Thursday, expect your winds to be light and variable in Prince William Sound. Otherwise, east winds 25 knots along the north Gulf Coast, increasing to 30 knots south and east of the Barren Islands to 40 knots north and west of the Barren Islands. Northeast winds 20 to 25 knots down Cook Inlet, with east winds about 35 to 40 knots across Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. Taking a look at the area for Friday, winds remain generally light in Prince William Sound, around 10 knots, as well as northern Cook Inlet. East winds about 20 to 25 knots along the north Gulf Coast, 30-knot easterly winds south and east of the Barren Islands to south of Kodiak Island, with northeast winds about 30 to 35 knots from the Augustine area down through Shelikof Strait. Taking a look at our Alaska Peninsula waters for Thursday, expect your winds to be out of the east-northeast about 30 to 40 knots on the south side of the peninsula, and east to northeast winds about 30 to 35 knots from Bristol Bay to the north side of the western Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at that area for Friday, expect your winds to be out of the east 25 to 35 knots south of the Alaska Peninsula, with east winds 30 knots from Bristol Bay to the north side of the western Alaska Peninsula. Now for the Aleutian Islands for Thursday, expect winds to be out of the north-northwest about 35 to 40 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands, 30 to 45 knots over the central Aleutian Islands, with winds out of the northwest 30 knots over the Kiska area, with winds becoming southeast about 30 knots out towards the western Aleutian Islands in that Shemya area. By Friday, expect the winds to become more east to northeast and then north over the eastern Aleutian Islands, about 25 to 35 knots there. 25 to 30 knot winds across the Atka region and out of the north-northwest. Northwest winds about 20 knots over the central to western Aleutian Islands, with winds out of the southeast at 30 knots persisting over the western Aleutian Islands. Taking a look now at the Bering Sea coastal waters for Thursday, expect your winds to be out of the north 30 knots across the Pribilof Islands, East winds about 40 knots coming out of the just south of Nunivak Island, out of the Kuskokwim Bay region, to 25 knots north of the Nunivak Island region, and northeast winds about 20 to 25 knots from St. Lawrence Island down to the St. Matthew Island waters. Taking a look at the area for Friday, east winds across the entire region, about 30 knots across the Pribilof Islands to the Kuskokwim Bay region, 25 knots from the Hooper Bay area across the St. Matthew Island region, with 20-knot easterly winds across the St. Lawrence Island waters. Taking a look at our Arctic coastal waters for Thursday, expect your winds to be out of the northeast from Wainwright down to outside of Kotzebue Sound, about 20 to 25 knots. Variable winds to about 10 knots from Barrow east. Taking a look at the area for Friday, those winds from Barrow east are going to become east at about 20 knots, and those winds will be picking up late in the day Friday, more towards Friday evening. Otherwise, still pretty light winds before that. East winds 30 knots off of the western Arctic coastal areas with right on down to Cape Lisburne, and southeast winds about 20 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound. Taking a look at the forecast again for tonight, expect rain heavy at times across that Kodiak Island area in this persistent moist southeasterly flow. Rain likely across much of the Bristol Bay area, possibly mixed with snow as you move a little bit further north towards the Yukon Delta and into the western portions of that Norton Sound area. Cloudy conditions up along the Arctic coast. Clear, cooler conditions across much of southeast Alaska, and potentially some fog in the Copper River Basin. Taking a look at the forecast again for Thursday, sunny conditions in southeast Alaska as well as much of the eastern interior and across much of the Brooks Range, with clouds persisting over the western Arctic coastal area. Rain persisting in Kodiak Island as well as the Alaska Peninsula, with a chance of rain across much of southwestern Alaska, possibly rain and snow mixed in that Norton Sound area. But we're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.